Speaking of which, today our very first speaker is James Mann. Most of you will know James as the outgoing chair of Dairy Australia. James has been on his own leadership journey around grounds for growth as well. So James will help set the scene for why we're here today. And as you'll see up on the panel outlining the speakers that will come in session one. So over to you, James.
Thank you, Greg. As Greg said, I'm the outgoing chair. I was in Melbourne last week with some board members, and I was described as yesterday's hero. I haven't worked out yet if that's a compliment or a smack in the face. Anyway, we'll work from that. So why are we here? Why are we here? I think we're here because as a collective we're inquisitive, we're probably innovative, we're definitely questioning, and we're very diverse. And I think we're diverse amongst ourselves, but we're also really diverse when it comes to the broader dairy community, dairy farming community, and really diverse when it comes to agriculture. And we should celebrate that diversity that we bring to the table. And we also need to be respectful to each other as we listen to other presenters today and the conversations we have, because we've all arrived here from different spaces, but we're all challenging ourselves primarily to get to a better space in our view. If you'd just gone back, let's go back 15 years to 2010, and somebody said that James Mann is going to be opening Grounds for Growth, and Grounds for Growth is about alternative grass and alternative ways of thinking, I would have said a couple of things. Number one, the organiser is definitely on grass, just not certain which sort, but they're definitely taking the good stuff. And secondly, I reckon there'd be more chance of Donald Trump being the President of the United States than me opening this. Anyway, I'm here, and I'm very happy to be here because back then I was absolutely a fully paid up member of whatever's working, urea, whatever, get plenty of it. If that works, slap it on, double it up, and we'll go again and punch it forward and keep going. So I guess a really good question and a point of reflection for myself is what's changed and why am I here now? So I guess on the farm, it was the primary driver of starting to think about what we're doing, and we were definitely seeing we were putting more and more on. We were having to be tighter and tighter about our management, and we were getting the same or less out. And in our business, growing homegrown food for money is the choke point and the profit driver. So when that becomes constrained, you have to think about what you're doing, and we use Les Sandals as our consultant, and in fairness, Les is going, mate, we have to think about a better way here because what we're doing now ain't working. So he spent a couple of years reading and putting all sorts of different wacky things in front of my ideas, and again, if we're talking about grass, at times I felt he was probably on the other sort too. But we've got to a point now where we embrace some of the thinking, and when we started doing it and trialling it, it started to work. So, 10 years down the track from when we started probably, or maybe 6 or 7, but where we are now to where we were perhaps in 2018 or 17 or something, we're consuming 2 kilos more, I'm not, our cows are, consuming 2 kilos a day more green grass, and over our cows that's 4 tonne a day extra. We've got a silage heap bigger than we've ever had before, so do I know which bits work? Absolutely not. Do I care? A little bit, but really happy to aware that there is definitely something in this space and it's working for us, and I'm not certain which bits, and I'm pretty happy that we chose to go down this theme. So at the same time we did the farm piece and the Les piece, DA became a bigger and bigger part of what I was doing, and one of the perks of the DA gig is you travel a lot around the country and you see a lot of different farmers. And there's some farmers that are absolutely, I respect a heap. I've known them for a while. and people such as John and Vicky Lillico down in Tassie, Grant Lisa Williams down in Gippsland, Reggie and Tanya Davis in the Western District, Claire and Andrew Jenkins in WA, all doing different things, getting great production, running really good farms, cows look magnificent, and they're all going away from, let's call it traditional. Let's call it ryegrass and heaps of urea. They're all doing it slightly differently. We're doing it slightly differently. You're all doing it probably slightly differently. That's a good thing. To me, it felt like we're all in a dark room. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's a fairly bright light, just not certain where the light switches are and exactly how to get there, but we're all going in the same direction. And also, so that was on the on-farm piece, so that gave me confidence and us confidence for our farm, and from a DA to encourage thinking and encourage the diversity that comes from this side, as much as we encourage the diversity that, you know, DA has to invest in the house cow story, has to invest in research in that. We need to invest in research in growing grass in a different way. And at the same time, we get exposure to government and to civil service as part of the DA gig. And I think it would be fair to say sometime between 2000 and perhaps 12 and 2020, pick a year, the climate debate changed from is it a debate about climate change and is it that, to be accepted by general population, and the question then goes, so what now and what are we going to do about it? So there's no question that government wants us to do something. They want to be seen to be doing something, and they definitely want to do something. What the something is, how it's described, I think is still loose, and they're absolutely looking for industry to take leadership and help them work through what that something is. And I think that's a good place to be. They still want productivity across agriculture. They still want aiming for $100 billion out of ag by 2030, and they recognise that unless we do whatever the something is carefully, there could be some unforeseen and unhelpful consequences of it. They're definitely watching Northern Europe, they're watching New Zealand, and saying proceed with caution but don't rush in. That's a good place to be, I think. ADF and DA have done a good job, along with broader agriculture, to get us to that place. So we talk about fumbling around in the dark. I reckon at least we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not certain that they're quite at that stage yet, but they're wanting to get there. So from us today and the next couple of days, I think from the DA's perspective and probably from a science perspective, what are the really big questions on the farm? What do we want to know more about? Where does collective action fit? And where does collective action and science come together to help us get to a more sustainable, a better place to go? These are the questions we need to think about for a couple of days, and I think our last session is a farmer-led session around that question. So think about that a little bit for the next couple of days. It's great to see the science place. So in my time, I've seen some great scientists around. John Henry's in the room. I've never actually had this debate with you, John, but I'm happy to later. But in my view, I think there's Richard Walmsley, there's Danny Donahue, Lucy Burkett in the room somewhere, of scientists that actually connect with on-farm stuff and want to get stuff done and really understand farmers. They're three great examples of it who I've followed, and when I see their names next to something, it's like, oh yeah, well, probably true. So I think it's great to see all three of them, and a bit surprising to see all three of them in the room, which means that at least there's a way forward. And Richard, I guess I understand you're summing the 2 days up. I've been asked to do it with some humour, and I'm thinking between us we'll be average, because you're usually a lot brighter than I am. And when we talk about scientists, I suppose I'll share one story. A while ago, and James Hill is also in the room from TIA, with the DA board. I think David Nation was there, and Paul Roderick, who's our current chair, maybe a couple of other directors, and we were talking about our investment in the tier farmlet projects. And this is the only time I think in my time at DA I really felt that I'd possibly pushed staff too far. I said to David afterwards, I don't know if I should have really done that, but I've done it, so we better see. So we're standing in the paddock at the back of Elliot and talking about the farms, and really said you have to be prepared to fail in this space. This farmlet 4 has to be where this community of this room is comfortable where it is to push the envelope, and if you fail, that's absolutely okay. And I think James will talk about it later, but at the time I thought, oh my God, I just feel really bad that I've actually destroyed this bloke's career. But anyway, he's come through it. And they've come through it, and I think they're in a better space for it. So failures, in collective action and science, guys, failure is absolutely okay. Much better that you fail than I fail on my farm, I can assure you. Yeah, so in closing, I guess, you've got yesterday's hero asking you to be inquisitive, questioning and respectful of other members of the club that we've just joined, which is a better way to grow grass. So have a great couple of days and look forward to your interactions. Thank you.
Big thanks, James. Never would have thought you was yesterday's man, mate. Never hear me say that anyway, not to your face. Right, moving gears. Brad Collins up next, and we'll be talking about farmer motivations for adopting practices that support optimum soil diversity and health. It's a bit of a chat, because Brad's been on a bit of a journey, and we're going to unpack that, or at least attempt to unpack it in about 10 minutes, hey mate? Grab a seat.
Hello. Thanks, Greg.
Hey, perfect.
Hi, everyone.
So first up, mate, just tell us a little bit about what you do, where you are.
Dairy farm in southwest Victoria, Dixie. Spent 20 years all round Victoria, South Australia and northern New South Wales. Share farming, what I would say, probably not doing a great job. But now settled back in Dixie, bought the home farm, and Tammy, myself, we're milking around 300, bit over 300 cows now, 150 hectares.
Yeah, well, gotcha. So you've been around a bit, you've had a bit of a journey to where you are now. Tell us a bit about what's really driven change. What's forced you to stop and think about where you're at and where you need to go next?
So 10 years ago, my first wife got diagnosed with cancer. Instantly then, we were share farming at home at Dixie.
Gotcha.
Straight away, I just pulled up stumps, leased her back to the farm and built a house in Camperdown.
Yep.
And we lived a life there for a couple of years.
Yep.
Nikki passed, I decided I wanted to go back farming again, but realised it wasn't sustainable the way we were. We achieved high production, we had high stocking rate, everything was working well, but the number one thing that wasn't working was profitability.
Yep.
We weren't making money, we'll lose money every year.
So you were busy chasing your tail, but just not quite getting to where you thought you should be.
Yeah. So then I started doing a couple of leadership courses, did a DA one, did a Great South Coast leadership course, really started listening to consumers, and thought, well, if I'm going to go back to this, I want to be sustainable into the future. So we broke it down. 6 years ago, so by then I've got a new wife, Tammy and I, we bought the farm with Mum and Dad. At that stage, what I call the farm was cooked. I believe that we destroyed it. We had an autumn break and then everything struck and then everything died. The crickets, the bugs, everything just come in and destroyed everything. So we had to resow everything. We bought the place and by then I thought, well, we've got to do something different.
Yep.
So instantly we sold half the cows, went back to 200 cows, and the thought, well, consumers want us to use less synthetics, so I focused on cutting that back and started growing different species and building.
So it's a bit of a reset, right?
Yeah, total reset.
Yep.
And now we've just been, year on year, we've been increasing numbers. We still use synthetics, but it's back to about a quarter or a third of what it used to be. Really focused on growing, instead of trying to grow so much feed in 8 weeks in the spring, we started growing feed either ends and spreading our growth. And it seems to be working. Since then, we're making profits.
Speaks for itself. So why is the consumer important to you?
Consumer, it was, for me, was what driving the change to the future. I wanted to have a farm that was going to be there in 20, 30 years' time. So I wanted to adapt and change to what consumers were asking. But at number one, that profit had to be always the driver as well.
Yep.
So, and I feel that we're not perfect, but we're definitely shaping a way that is working.
Good stuff. So tell me a bit more about what cooked looks and feels like.
Cooked and feels like a failed farmer.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much. That stage, I was not enjoying farming.
Yep.
I pretty much, I thought, well, this is enough.
I've had it.
I've failed and it hasn't worked. But the reset was great. Like the reset, I actually love what I do now.
Yeah.
I love waking up in the morning and know that our product is being sold around the world, sold locally, consumers appreciate it.
It's value.
It's value. So, cooked was a big change for me.
So tell me a bit more about the main benefits you see of being delivered about how you farm now. It's obviously good for you, it's good for your soul, but like it's good for consumers too.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
You feel like you're building a business that's going to be sustainable. So you're enjoying it is number one.
Yeah.
You're creating a product that is, I feel, even though you may not feel appreciated all the time, you feel appreciated because you know you're answering some of their questions and you're driving a business that's doing better every single day.
Yeah, 100%. No shortage of challenges though, right, man? You've had everything thrown at you. What are the big things that you think, on reflection, looking back, have been a key challenge for you, or a stepping point to allow you to flip it, to see the opportunity? What are the big things that you think would be useful for the crowd as they move into potential changes like this too?
The biggest thing for me was becoming accountability for your own bullshit.
Gotcha. Simple.
Yeah. The minute I realised that most of the problems I had, instead of blaming everybody else, the problems were mine.
Yeah.
And once I accepted them, and I was able to not compete against a neighbour, I learned to just compete against myself.
Yeah, gotcha.
They were the biggest changes for me, was accepting the changes.
Yeah,
For me.
yeah. So I get the sense that the leadership journey that you've been on over the years has really set you a strong foundation for change as well. Tell me a little bit more about the different leadership journeys and the different leadership initiatives you've been involved in.
Yeah, I've been involved in a few. So I was on the Western Dairy Board for 4 years. That was a good experience.
Yeah.
And you get to meet a lot of people and hear a lot of different stories. I was part of the local UDV and then was on policy for a little bit at UDV, VFF.
Yeah.
And then I was part of the change to Dairy Farmers Victoria on coming out and focusing. Our focus, or what I've learned, is that we must deliver to the grassroots farmer and listen and build something that's going to work for not the people above, but the people below, and build it up. And just create confidence in the industry.
Yeah, 100%. So you've actively gone out and looked for leadership development opportunities, yeah?
I did for
Or they've fallen on your lap?
there was no, well, that kind of fall there. It's not hard to be in a leadership thing. They're pretty much looking for people just to do it.
Yeah.
And it was part of my change, I think, was to get out and listen to people.
Yeah.
And it was part of the development for me to grow.
And listen to yourself as well, I get the feeling, right? Like you from those early days, farming with mum and dad, being a little bit frustrated, an unusual concept for any young farmers in the room here, I'm sure. But yeah, that obviously, it's given you ability to trust yourself, back yourself.
Yeah, I'm willing to, you have to be willing to take a risk sometimes, but make the risk calculated. And if don't dip your toe in, for me, it was not dip the toe in fully, it was about build it over 10 years.
Yeah.
And I reckon we're halfway through those 10-year change, and yeah, every year it just seems to be becoming easier and easier. And long way from perfect, but every day is better. So.
Speaking of which, what does better soil health look and feel like to you?
For me, you feel you're leaving the place in a better.
Yep.
So that's number one. Two, sustainability, profitability, cattle health. It actually costs less to grow.
Yep.
So there's a lot. There's always hurdles, but the hurdles are pretty easy to overcome.
Yep. I like your enthusiasm. Speaking of which, and as I said to you first thing this morning, I can chat for you for 6 hours, no problem at all. The problem is we've got 10 minutes on the agenda. But so I encourage people to reach out to you during the breaks this evening, tomorrow. But what advice would you give someone sitting in the crowd here that's been contemplating the change or experimenting, but maybe not willing to back themselves? What advice would you give them?
There's plenty of evidence out there now that it can work, it does work. And back yourselves, listen, but always compete against yourselves. Like, find out what your flaws are and what you think you can do better, and focus on 2 or 3 of those things, and just grow on that. They're the things that I try to. I try not to have too many things at once going.
Yep. A few things well.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm doing well, but you're doing better.
It's a process of continuous improvement, hey mate.
Yeah.
And how do you feel? You know, as we started, you've been on a journey, right? And so what lies ahead? What's the light at the end of the tunnel look like, mate? What's your happy space?
My happy space is to be fully self-sustainable, drought-proof, climate change-proof, everything-proof. We're building those structures around us to make us that. We've done a lot of development over the last 5 years to improve and take those risks away. So it's continue for the industry to grow and improve and make sure that consumers recognise and are proud of what we do. And for me, it's just keep. I'm not in a space to grow. I will increase numbers,
Yep.
but I've made a bit of a rule that I'm not going to borrow any more money.
Yep.
If everything we do now is out of cash flow and apply for grants and do what we can that way. So it's just to make the space better.
Structured growth. Well, very last question before we wrap up. Someone sitting in the crowd that's been toying with the idea of a bit of leadership development, what would you say to them?
Well, I think the industry is desperate for leadership, and I think we definitely need to open that space up. And don't be afraid to put your voice across. I think every voice needs to be listened to. And by listening to every voice, you create a better outcome. And so leadership is rewarding. It can be time consuming. It's certainly rewarding, and you can get a lot of benefit out of it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, mate. It's been a fantastic chat, all in a little over 10 minutes. Again, we'll have a Q&A session at the very end of this very first group of speakers. So maybe have your questions ready for Brad. We'll hand over now to Jack Holden.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you. Great story, Brad. It's very encouraging to see that sort of narrative from a farm when we talk about how you turn sustainability into a commercial advantage here. So, I'm Jack Holden. I've spent the last 15 years or so working with corporates in corporate sustainability, mostly with Fonterra. And in that time, in that 15 years, I think we've gone from thinking about sustainability in these commercial transactions as a risk to be managed, and I think James sort of talked about this with some of his history. Moving that to actually this is a genuine commercial opportunity, right? So this is a genuine commercial opportunity, and most of my time in that has moved away from talking to the internal team about our risk management and problems into who are the customers here who actually want this? Who are the customers here who are engaged by a story we've just heard about Brad and his operation? And how do we encourage them to create extra value for the industry by essentially taking more volume from people like that? And I think that's the narrative here. There's a price premium for a small slice of the volume. There's a price premium for particular innovations, but they're short term. And those innovations may well be science-backed, but there are plenty that probably aren't, that people have actually managed to extract a premium from. Good luck to them, right? I think that's just part of the commercial game. I think the real game, though, is where do we go to move all of our volume? Where do we take the whole industry and make sure that the customers that we've got at the end of that have seen there's no risk to their brands in the supply chain that they've got. They've got really credible and compelling farmers with really good science-backed stories and credible plans that say, actually, yeah, I want to put more volume to you guys. And sustainability is just one of a bundle of attributes that we're selling, right? So you've got to have safe food, you've got to have regular supply, you've got to deliver when you're going to say you're going to deliver. And sustainability has moved from being a product that we price separately or an attribute of a product that we price separately to just part of the bundle. It's part of the bundle of high value customers going, it's got to have that story in behind it, in with all the other things, right? And I think that's the way we move large volumes, whole industry volumes, into customers that are high value customers. Not all of them are high value, but where they exist, then this is the opportunity we've got. And when we've got stories like the soils and pasture diversity attribute story, that is a very compelling story, let's find customers who actually value that. And I think there's really big opportunities there. So, credit to those that have put it together and do that. I think the other thing I think that I take from that time talking and listening to customers is that they actually don't know what they want. They do care. They care a lot about being able to see continuous improvement. They care a lot about being able to say, yep, I feel protected and I feel like you guys who are the experts have got something going on that's interesting, right? Something going on that helps me and my story with the product when I go to consumers at the end of that. But exactly what that is, I'm less stressed, right? And so I think if we keep going to them with proactive stories and proactive solutions about the attributes and the continuous improvement that we take in the industry, then they're okay. They'll go, yep, okay, keep going, I want more of that. If we go quiet, if we don't give them things, they will invent things that don't work for us. Guaranteed that. They need stories, they need attributes, they need to have a sustainability part of their bundle. And if we as an industry don't take them things, they'll go, well, here's something that you can have. You can have left-handed cows or dolphin-friendly milk or whatever you like, and we'll be going, I'm not sure that's really going to help us. And so we have to get in front of that. So we have to take them attributes, take them stories, and take them credible systems and processes that they go, oh, okay, great, keep going, I'll go and worry about someone else who's got issues, you guys are fine. I think that's the real proactive opportunity we've got in here, and soils and pasture diversity just lives in that so well, I think, in my view. I think that the focus then is now, what are the win-win activities that we've got in our near-term horizon? What are the things that we can do, breeding, feeding, pastures, that actually will make us money, where the science stacks up and the business case stacks up, make us money on our farms at a farm scale, and then provide a better footprint. Let's just call it a footprint. Better footprint, whether it's a greenhouse gas or a climate or some sort of broader environmental footprint. How do we get a better sustainability story from something that makes money on the farm? Right? And I think we've got opportunities there. They're the ones we should go to first. Right? Just keep going with those. And the narrative or the KPI, if you like, for the customer is proportion of farms who've done the stuff that makes sense. Right? Proportion of farms who've actually optimised their systems and taken out the leaks and got their the different attributes of farm management, and you guys will know more about that than me, have got all those things humming, so that's what we tell them is, right, our farms are engaged, our farms are full of good ideas and progress, and that's what we're actually bringing to them. We're not actually sort of saying, look, here is a whole heap of different data points and you go and work it out, right? We have to give them the story that the farm coverage, the coverage of the farms that are doing the right thing, they're doing good things, is really, really compelling. And that will give us not just control of the narrative with customers, particularly ill-informed customers, but it also gives us, it gives us profit in the industry, and it gives us time and bandwidth and confidence to go and do the things that are harder, because there are some hard things that we have to go and face into those as well. So don't start with the hardest thing. Don't start with the one that's equally disengaged to a customer. Start with the ones that make us money. That builds us the credibility, the time and the resource to go to some of the things that will be harder, that eventually customers will go, what are you doing about that? So get in front of that narrative, I think, is what we've learned from that. And there's plenty there in terms of tools that we've got that help us take that. What's the incentive to take up those tools? What's the incentive to actually drive that? Is ultimately there is a market there, right? So how do we pull that through in not just pricing, but also the bundle of attributes that we actually take to the customer? So I think that the opportunity there is quite large. The opportunity there is always increasing. I think it's it's not going to go away, and our job is to go, right, we've got an industry, we've got a cost base in that industry. The more valuable that we can find customers that appreciate this, that actually are happy for us to co-design with them rather than actually tell us what to do, the more profit there is in this for us. And I think that will drive much more adoption, much better behaviour for us. I think it's really important though that we think about, when we talk about markets and we talk about customers, we're sometimes it's a bit too coarse. We actually sort of go, well, what does China want? Or what does Europe want? Or they're not customers, they're countries, right? So we have to go and say, the customer here is the high value hotel chain in Malaysia, Singapore, wherever, that actually want fresh milk from Australia really quickly. They will pay way over the odds for that if we can lock in really good supply, right? That's just an example, right? There are niche customers here, and we have to go and find the individual niche customers. It's not just saying, here's a commodity product ready for a country. It's actually going, this is our product, here's all its attributes, and that's really, really suitable to a very single individual who makes a buying decision somewhere overseas and locks in a big volume for a long term at a good price, and then we go off to the next one, right? So we have to be really discreet and really important that we actually focus on individual customers and their procurement decisions at scale. And I think to just sort of say, look, we've got something that's really good, come and get it. The commodity story really doesn't help us in that process. So I think that's the sort of hub of all this. The customers do want something, they want continuous improvement, then they go, well, you come to us with the ideas, you guys are the expert. I look at things like the tools like Australian Dairy Sustainability Framework, the Sustainable Dairy Partnership, and those sort of frameworks that allow us to sort of record progress, to demonstrate that we've got controls and systems in place that make a difference and are credible and actually sending us in the right way. For customers to go, that's fine, I've seen what you've got there, I've seen that you've got a system, I've seen you've got controls, I've seen you've got initiatives. I don't need all the data from every farm to actually know that now. You guys have given me the confidence. I will go away and write up a purchase order for you for the volume that actually is the volume we need here. So use those existing things there that are credibility builders. Put our initiatives like what we're going to talk about over the next couple of days into those existing places, and that's the bundle of goods. That's the attribute we take that's called sustainability, and we put that up with quality and safety, delivery, all the other things that we do. And the customer goes, right, that's what sustainability looks like to them. That's what success, commercial success looks like to us. I think the important thing for us is these are not sort of, this practice leads to this dollars. Right? We're way past that now. It's like, this is a really important part of a credible business, credible product and product supply chain. And that's the bit now that we actually have to bundle up and sell. So with that, I wish you well over the next day or two to put this into that bundle of things that we're selling. There's certainly demand and appetite for it there, and the better we do this, the more we control the narrative, the more we control the narrative, the more we make out of this. So off we go. Thank you, Brett.
Hello, my name's Laura and I work for Greenham, and you're probably thinking, why the hell is a beef processor here talking to a bunch of dairy farmers? Well, we all work in Australian agriculture. Many of you probably sell cold cows to us, and we've got a dairy beef program, so we are invested in working together as combined industries to work out how we sell a better product and keep consumer confidence in everything that we do. So I've got some pretty slides to keep me on track so I don't start telling you things about items that aren't relevant to today. So bear with me while I show you some pretty pictures. So for those that aren't familiar with Greenham, we are a 6th generation family business, started as a butcher shop in Melbourne, and we've now grown to a big beef processing business. So we have a plant at Tongala, which will be the closest to here. We've got one in Moe in Gippsland and another in Smithton, Tasmania. So we produce boutique brands which are focused around grass-fed and natural, free-from claims. So our business is a primarily export business. So 90% of the product that we produce ends up overseas to discerning customers. Most of that product does end up in the US. The reason why is because we produce that grass-fed natural product, which is really hard for them to produce in large volumes because they specialise in the grain market. So that's kind of the lens that I'm coming to you from. So, consumers. Think about yourself going to the shop after school or on a Saturday after school sports and you're doing the week's grocery shop or fortnight's grocery shop. You're whizzing through there. You're on a time crunch. You've probably got 2 kids trailing behind you. You're thinking about all the chores that you need to do and you're trying to remember what's on that grocery list that you forgot to bring with you. So data shows that consumers have no more than 5 seconds on average to make a decision about every item that they're putting in that grocery cart. So remember, they're not just picking up that bottle of milk or that steak for the next dinner's night. They're looking at, okay, well, I've got dinner for Wednesday, I've got the parents coming around on Friday night, oh, do I need laundry liquid? Oh, do I need to get school snacks? These are the sort of decisions that our consumers are making. They've got 5 seconds to make each single one of those decisions. So that's why we as consumers, and we're all in this room are consumers, we go back to those brands or to those claims that really resonate with us, that we bought before and we can trust. So consumers, and we're all consumers again, so remember how you purchase, is that we make values-based decisions. So we're looking at things that speak to what we believe in. So for us in the room, we're probably buying Australian products. We're probably buying from those dairy brands. If you're going to go buy a boutique cheese, that dairy branch that you're selling your milk into. It could be the beef from the processing plant that you sell your cows to. It could be that Italian pasta that you had when you were over in Italy and saw in the grocery stores. They're the sort of value-based decisions that you're making and what consumers all around the world are making. So when we are producing a product, we need to speak to that. We need to provide them with options to meet those values in a way that they can make a decision quickly. So we're looking for on-pack claims. That's why it's really important, and your processors will be asking the same, is things that we can put on there that say, free from antibiotics. These are things we do each and every day, but consumers don't know that. So we need to be able to verify that there's no antibiotics, there's no hormones, it's grass-fed, whatever it might be that they're looking for, be able to put it on a pack so they can go, oh yeah, that's the one I wanted. And that's how we get them to put our products in those carts each and every time. So those consumers are making those value-based purchasing decisions. Now, we as Greenham, and your milk processors will be the same, they're not selling direct to those consumers in the most instances. Normally there's a customer sitting in between. Now those customers have to meet those consumer needs. So they're coming to market, so to us and to you guys, and saying, hey, I need to be able to make these on-pack claims. My consumers want XYZ claims, and so I need to be able to make those claims in a really substantial way. So as Jack mentioned, they're looking for that data and that assurance that what they're putting on the claim is actually there, so that they don't get caught up in some scandal, because that's the last thing they want as a business, and they want to be able to demonstrate to their customers of why they should come back and spend more money on that product. So we've got this really big myriad of, I guess, push-pull dynamics happening in that market where people are wanting different items. They need to find it and they need to be able to trust it. So sustainability is just one of those items. And so we're starting to see customers coming to us and looking for support on, well, how can I prove something is sustainable, but how do I have that discussion with consumers? As Jack mentioned, they're really new on this journey as well. They know sustainability. Their board has told them, go get me a product line that's sustainable. There is no real solid definition for what sustainable might mean, so they're still going through that discovery process themselves, and that's something that we can help them with. So, looking at the top 3 rows, because we don't have enough time to cover all of them, you'll see the US, so that's our biggest market here at Greenham. Now, sustainability awareness is really developed. So they are already looking for products that have sustainable claims. They're looking for free from, for natural, for organic, for some sort of sustainability claim, and they're actively purchasing them for that claim. We in Australia, we are probably more fortunate in the fact that we have a lot of trust in our food, we understand our food systems a little better, we have a bit more choice. And so consumers, whilst they're looking for sustainability claims, they're probably not as far along that journey because they expect things are sustainable. So they're also looking for things that have health and nutrition benefits to them. We then have the third line here is Japan, which is one of our big areas that we sell into at Greenham. They're a different case. So the consumers themselves weren't the ones driving this change for sustainable products, it was actually the government. The government put these big targets on corporates and said, you need to make sure that your products have X% of sustainable product, whether you're making it yourself or importing it. And then they started putting those claims on packs, which then led consumers to go, oh, what's that? What is that about? They went and did their research, and now we're starting to see that that demand is evolving in the consumer space. So what we're seeing is there's multiple different ways sustainability comes about in consumer demand. It's driven by multiple lenses. And Jack's mentioned this before, and I'm sure this won't be the last time we hear about it today. But we're seeing both a push and a pull mechanism for sustainability. When I started in the industry a bit over 10 years ago, animal welfare was all the rage. Everything in processing was about animal welfare and how do we verify it and how do we sell that and get a premium for it. That's been and gone. Consumers expect that everything is raised to a really high animal welfare standard. We're now in sustainability. This sector is moving really, really fast. It's moving fast because we have this push-pull mechanism. We have on the left here, the policy space. So we have global targets being set, we have national targets being set, and we've got state and council level targets being set, which is driving this. So we're getting this kind of push mechanism that's saying you need to do this, these are the targets you need to meet. We then have a consumer on the other end, which is really educated. Everyone, at least all of us in this room, have at least one phone attached to our hands most of the day. Every consumer is the same. They're being fed information, they can do their own research really quickly, and they're starting to really want these value-based decisions. This is stuff that people really take to heart. We've moved out of a scarcity mindset where we're just buying food to put on the table to buying food that actually meets those values. So we're starting to see this push-pull mechanism. Sustainability is moving really, really fast. Every week we're getting questions from customers about sustainability and how we can display it. So because of that, Greenham launched into developing a sustainability standard. So I won't go into all the detail here, but we actually went through a co-design process. So we actually took the Australian Beef Sustainability Framework, very similar to the dairy one, gave it to a bunch of producers and said, what does this look like on farm? We then had the version 1 of the standard. We took it to customers and said, well, what does this look like? What does this mean from a sustainability standpoint? What sells sustainability? What can you get $1 for? And we came up with version 2 of the standard. We then sent it back to our lovely producer group, and they trialled it on farm for 6 months, just to make sure that this was actually outcomes focused and added value to their business. So that's where we've gotten to this kind of endpoint of a sustainability standard, which is focused on outcomes, demonstrating sustainability outcomes on farm, because number one, it needs to add value to the farm for the farm to be sustainable, which is what we're trying to show. So it covers 4 areas. The environmental stewardship component, that green box, that'll be the one you expect to be there. We have the others there as well. Economic resilience is really important to demonstrate to upwards to those customers that we need to make sure that our farms are in the black to be green. There is no point us being in debt, we're not going to be sustainable, so we need to look after that core business first. We then make sure we've got items in there such as people and community, because we all in this room are very good about forgetting about ourselves and our families and making sure that we're looking after us and making sure we're looking after those dangerous environments that we do work in. So these are the sort of holistic perspectives that we came to this with, and this has been driven by our producers and is actually been co-designed with those customers. So we're getting a really great input here that comes out with a fully sustainable outcome. Now we meet consumers, our producers, where they stand. This is really innovative because it allows people to dip their toe in, get a feel for sustainability, what that looks like in their program, and then they can work through these tiers as they please. At tier 2, we're able to provide a small premium. This area doesn't attract huge premiums, unfortunately, as a market at the moment, but hopefully that might change as the consumer becomes more savvy. But we're able to help support producers where they are, help them set goals, help them to collect that data, to be able to produce a really strong product that meets those customer requirements. So at Tier 2, we're able to actually meet claims that meet a certified regenerative label. Now, regenerative is something that customers love because it's outcomes focused. They don't like the term sustainability when they're looking on a pack, because what does sustainability mean? They're wanting something that's good for the environment, and regenerative, at least in the US, and we're seeing the same in Europe, actually to a consumer means environmental outcomes. That's what they're looking for. Healthy soils and healthy pastures, what we're talking about here today and tomorrow. So we're able to be able to demonstrate these claims and put them on pack, which means that consumer in that 5 seconds making a decision can see certified regenerative and go, yeah, that's the one that I want. And so that product ends up in their trolley each and every week they do that shopping. And as always, it's backed by science, because we do nothing without science and integrity, because that's what we as an industry stand on, and we want to be able to demonstrate to consumers that that's what we're doing. So I'm out of time. Happy to talk at any point over the next couple of days on anything beef or dairy or ag industry. I would love to hear about your businesses and how we might be able to show you sustainability credentials. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Thank you to Dairy Australia for inviting me all the way from Western Australia to come and talk to you today. I am a soil biologist. I started my career at UWA in 1974 doing research for the Australian Wool Corporation, as it was called then. So I started working with the wool industry on pastures, looking at soil biology, and my expertise at the time was on arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. Anyone heard of them? Yeah. So for 50 years I've been investigating soil biology, and I must say I've been really impressed by the conversations in the last couple of days, because the majority of my career has been in a situation where soil biology has been on the edge. And in recent years we now embrace soil health as a word, and the soil biology being integrated into farming systems is really being looked at seriously. So I'm going to give you a quick overview. Wrong one. Oops. Just firstly, on this journey of 50 years, we've been funded by the industry and in collaboration with many other researchers by a lot of organisations, and I just throw them up there. These slides will be available to you, so if you miss things, don't worry too much. But we're grateful as a team for the support we've had for our research. Now, this is a little movie of soil animals, springtails, from a farmer who's in Pingelly in Western Australia, very interested in soil health. And we did a workshop and found these little guys in the soil when we were doing that workshop for farmers. But I put the videos up just to remind us that soils are alive. Even the dried old soils out there have got good soil organisms there, and it's how we manage those soils to get the most of them, out of them, is what we're on about. So communities of soil organisms provide the background for soil health, healthy soils. Their abundance and diversity and their function is tied to the soil characteristics. So the environmental conditions of the soil influence how the organisms, or influence what's there and how they work. So we don't manage the organisms per se, we manage the soil with the plants combined to get the most out of these organisms. So how do we do that? Of importance, the structural complexity of organic matter is key. So we need soil carbon to drive these organisms. They don't all use carbon directly from organic matter, but the organic matter is a driver, and you grow that, you put that into the soil. The roots, the residues, whatever you put into the soil that's carbon-based is the driver of soil health. And whatever healthy soil is, it supports resilience of farming systems. And this is really what we've been struggling with for many years, and we don't have all the answers, but this is what we're about. So I'm going to talk about these 4 things. So the significance of soil biodiversity, the significance of plant diversity. So you are putting into practice this plant diversity. It is driving this healthy soil, but it's through the biological processes as well as the chemistry and the physics, but these are all in together. But it's about the local soil conditions. So I come from Western Australia. A lot of our soils are sandy. We can't get the production that you can get from heavier soils. So your paddock is what you're interested in, not someone next door. And then management is about disturbance. So when you manage your soil and your land, you are disturbing it. And that disturbance is influencing soil organisms, and that is then the consequence of how those organisms work for you comes out at the end. So land management is about disturbance. Not that that's bad, but it can be, but primarily it's about how it works to influence these organisms. Now this is a pretty messy slide, but it's very complex in soil. So if you add organic matter to soil, and that might be from roots, from exudates from plants, from amendments that you might add, that carbon source is going to drive what is going on in the system. And all these arrows show that all the organisms and all the groups interact with one another, and some of them eat each other, so it's a pretty dynamic system. It's very rapid in response to environmental change. So when the rain comes, these organisms get going really fast. But they might have a short cycle and then something takes over. So this is a dynamic system. And you are managing this with whatever you do. And what we're hoping is the practices that you're talking about, the multi-species plants, and the way you're managing inputs is the driver of success. So just as a brief overview, the things that these organisms do include nutrient transformations. So they transform an element from one form to another. They are involved in nutrient cycling, which refers to how much gas goes into the greenhouse gases leave the soil. So it's a global cycle we're talking about here. But they can involve symbiotic organisms, so the mycorrhizas, rhizobium. These organisms can also cause plant disease. So you've got organisms in your soil which can be a problem. They're naturally there. So the aim is to get it so they don't get a foothold. But you also have organisms in the soil that can suppress those disease-causing organisms, so that you've got 2 things counteractive here, and we want it to go one way rather than the other. The mycorrhiza story is there, they're ubiquitous in nearly all situations except for canola. Of course, that's an unusual situation. But these organisms also collectively influence soil structure, and Pauline talked about this yesterday. So the organisms don't just cycle nutrients. In cycling nutrients, they do other things, and they exude gums, they stick bits of particles together. So they have a physical contribution as well as a nutrient contribution. And they can influence the water infiltration, water accessibility. So they can cause water repellents under some circumstances with some forms of organic matter, but they can do the reverse as well. They can release or overcome water repellents. So they're working in 2 directions. And this is the situation we have. So we have chemical, biological and physical contributions of organisms in soil, but primarily because we have historically driven soil fertility from a get fertilised out of the bag situation, then it's had an emphasis on the chemistry. And fertility has been primarily about chemistry. But it's about physics, so the soil structure is part of this. But also, in all this time we haven't really focused on the biology. The biology has been busy. And one of the ways it's been very busy, it's been chewing up your carbon and sending it into the atmosphere. So while we haven't focused on soil biology as a part of fertility, the biology is very active, but in some ways it's negative. So it has this overdoing the cycling of nutrients, losing them, creating nitrate that leaches, for example. We've had these fertilisers can often override symbiosis, both nitrogen fixing and mycorrhizal. They can cause water repellents, as I mentioned, and lead to low carbon. So those processes are biological, but they're not the way we want it to work. We want to do something different to that. So we want to focus on building the beneficial component of the soil health, the biology. So the biological fertility relies on beneficial nutrient cycling, symbiosis, more carbon, and less water repellents. So, and also the physical components of the soil are influenced by these organisms as the process goes through the cycle, through the season. So you've got organisms in soil which can work for you or against you. And the way you get the most out of them to work the way you want is to choose the environmental conditions that they are exposed to where the good processes work. So that's the balance. So you can actually have a lot of biological activity and all it's doing is burning up your carbon. Now, that's not the way we want it. We want just the right amount of biological activity. We want to protect the carbon. But one way we can protect the carbon is by having that physical component of soil fertility, which is influenced by the organisms themselves. So this is all interrelated. So if you start thinking just for fertility from chemistry or just from physics, where's the biology fit? It actually fits in both. You've got biological processes contributing to soil chemical fertility and contributing to soil physical fertility. So it's all integrated. Once you start to try and unpick it, it's not going to work. So let's quickly talk about plants, and we've had great demonstration yesterday about plant diversity. But the primary thing that plant diversity does is alter the organisms, the relative abundance of organisms in soil that contribute. Whoops, I'm sorry, I've forgotten which button I'm pressing. Sorry. Here we go. No. Now I'm going backwards. Okay. So just quickly, the whole point about the diversity of plant species is that creates habitat diversity. So creates diversity of the environment the organisms are exposed to. So that diversity leads to biodiversity of the soil organisms. So it's quite simple. So you don't need to know that this is happening, but that is what's happening when you create this diversity of plant species. You create a diversity of microbes, which have a diversity of function. And that includes their contribution to physical and chemical fertility. Now, just getting down into the soil with the plant biodiversity, at the roots is where it all happens. So roots exude a lot of stuff out in the soil, and those exudates kickstart a lot of microbial activity in the soil. So the rhizosphere is crucial in this situation, but in a pasture, a lot of the soil is actually rhizosphere. The other point about organic matter, you can grow your own, you can bring it in, but the roots are important here, but the actual structure of the carbon influences what happens in the soil. So that diversity of carbon is also important. You don't want it to be all sugar, you don't want it to be all lignin, you want it to be a diverse component of the system, but also you want it to degrade at different rates, and you want some of it to be protected so it doesn't burn off. So all of these components of organic matter management are important here, but the organisms are driving it depending on the soil conditions you provide for them. Just a quick point about exudates, and this is a simple story. The more you graze, the less roots you have, the less carbon going to the soil. And this is a simple experiment we did, grazing with scissors. But with ryegrass, the more you graze, the less carbon, in this case, in the roots. So just think of the grazing has a big impact on the soil biology because that supplying A, the roots, but B, the supply of carbon that leaks, and a lot of carbon leaks out into the soil. Now, the significance of soil type. So, this is a picture of sandy soil. A lot of holes in sandy soil. You can't store much carbon in sandy soil. And the reason is that it's accessible to microbes and they burn it off. So they degrade it very fast. No matter what kind of agricultural organic matter you put in, it breaks down very fast if it's not protected. And so what you have might be different to what someone else has. If you've got a sandy soil, you're not going to get the production that someone who's got a heavier soil has got. So that affects this biodiversity story, but don't worry about the people over the fence. Only what you have matters. Now this is a figure from David Strong, who, his supervisor is sitting here at the front of the desk. Peter Sale, who I met, and I hadn't met him before, it's wonderful to see you. But David did an amazing PhD study on a patch of soil, looking at all the biological processes that are going on in this soil, and the reference is here that you can look at later. But the point is, this is a diagram of a soil pore, and there's a lot going on in soil pore, and because Pauline yesterday was also talking about these pores. So pores are where water can go in and out, dry out, they can dry. A lot of organisms can live in this, they're not broken down by, or they're protected from other organisms eating them. But in the pores, the hyphae can get access to water, the carbon can get protected in the very fine layers of the pore, but the nutrient cycling occurs within the more open parts of the pore. So pores are tiny little spaces in the soil, and basically the more you can create in the soil, the better. Now, everything is interacting. So you've got the soil type, the diversity of the soil is interacting with the diversity of the plants, which is interacting with the diversity of the microbial community, and that includes the animals within that community as well. So everything is interacting, but remember what I said, it's about the environment you're creating with what you do that makes this all work one way or another. And then that all interacts with soil amendments. So whether you buy something or you grow something, adding amendments to soil then fits into that framework. So you are adding amendments and that changes the environment. So getting on to these, what you do. So in land management, you're disturbing a system. Disturbance, oh, you want the slide, do you? Because it's not connected here, I've got a bit of a disconnect. So disturbance leads to change in the soil, because sometimes you have to sow the seed again, or plough it up for one reason, or leave it unploughed for another reason. So you are managing the soil, that's a disturbance. You're managing the plant diversity, that's another disturbance, presumably a good one. You're disturbing by adding amendments, and anything from something that you buy or something that you grow. And I'm including fertilisers here. So the fertilisers are a disturbance, as are any organic biological amendments. So these disturb the environment of the organisms, and that affects their function one way or another. But also, when you disturb the habitat of organisms in the soil, they interact. It's a two-way. So you disturb it, and then they affect it as well. So it's a cycle. It's not a one-way track. You disturb the organisms, and they do their thing or not, and then they have an impact on the habitat of organisms as well. So it's very complex. But the bottom line is, whatever the organisms are exposed to is then what they're reacting to. And if it's dry, they're having a sleep. If it's wet, they're going full belt. If it's anaerobic, they mightn't function because there's no oxygen. So that exposure to the environment is what it's all about. And again, it depends on the soil type. So I'm going to just run through this. Whoops. Sorry, I think you missed that one. I'm going to run through this a few slides about hypothesis related to the effects of soil and plant disturbance on microbial communities. And the reason I want to just do this is because there's no single level of biodiversity that you need to get. There's no single magic number here, because it depends on your soil, it depends what you're doing, it depends on your management. So, but just bear with me while I run through this briefly. So if you've got a sandy soil, you'll be limited in the total organism numbers that you can have in the soil compared to a heavier soil. But if that heavier soil is compacted, that will have a big impact on what that soil can look like biologically. Now, I've modelled this on some work by Professor Michael Huston in the US, who developed this theory of dynamic equilibrium models. It's a big story, but let's just quickly see what it says. So, a sandy soil will have low production compared to a heavier soil, but then the level of disturbance, the level of disturbance will have another effect. So you've got more than one thing happening. So the production is affecting what the diversity is, and the level of disturbance is. And interestingly, the more disturbance or the less disturbance isn't just simply a story of what the diversity is. It turns out, by my understanding of the way the ecology works, is that a sandy soil, you don't want to disturb it much because the maximum biodiversity will be when it's less disturbed. But a heavier soil, which can become compacted more, then you need some disturbance to get the maximum biodiversity. I'm just throwing this out to demonstrate the complexity of this. It's not a one-way track. You do this, you'll get this level of diversity. It's complex, and it depends on what you're growing, what the soil type is, etc. Remember that fertilisers are part of this story, and my history has been with fertilisers, how it affects soil biology. It's moved to measurements of all other inputs into the soil, and we did some work with GRDC looking at this, which when you get the slides later, you can click on this. There's a story about soil amendments and how that affects soil biology. Soil amendments affect and can be used to overcome soil constraints, and there's a lot of soil constraints. Sorry, I'm really unconnected with these two things. The soil constraints is what we're all about. We're trying to overcome, using your soil practices, land management, overcome soil constraints, and the major way you can do this, apart from adding fertiliser, is to add carbon or incorporate carbon in the system. And you can buy a lot of carbon sources, a lot of soil amendments that are biological, and a lot of them fix up the constraints that you have in your system. Finally, let's look on the left-hand side, your left-hand side. So management based on chemical fertility, you have to replace the nutrients, but basically you're replacing the nutrients in bulk. They're fairly soluble, but that approach will override a lot of these biological processes that I've been talking about. So that's the main thing. But going along just the fertiliser route, you won't get a lot of the benefits from the soil biology. But when you at least have a focus on soil biological fertility, the nutrients still need to be replaced by maybe fertiliser, maybe other things. But they are supplied more gradually in the system. But the beneficial biological processes will take time to develop. The time is needed for that resilience and healthy soil in your farming system. Thank you.
Well, from sure you agree. I think we could sit and listen to Lynette all day, but right now we're going to move to question and answer time. So I'll quickly just get our speakers sorted. Yep. Plenty of room for you, Brad. Remember that. Well, we've covered some ground, right? Hopefully we've set the scene about why we're here and really just laid some base foundations of, or tried to lay some base foundations about what it all means. So now over to you guys for some Q&A. So there's some roving microphones. Lots of opportunity over the next 15 minutes to ask questions. If I could just ask you to say your name and maybe where you're from as we kick things off. So, who's got a question? Genevieve.
I'm Genevieve Fleming, I'm from Sefton's. Brad, we heard about your farming, and I'm interested to know how you know when you have healthy soil. Do you do formal testing of your soil?
So we do soil testing, but most of my has been trial and error, and I've come along really much for these 3 days is to get more guts around what I've actually been trial and erroring, and to do more research and to understand it, my soils better. So yeah, definitely for me, I see it in the differences, but now I need to learn and understand it, exactly how it's working.
Perfect. I think we have another question up here on the left, please.
Hi, my name is Sophie McCaskill. I'm from Dairy Australia. Thank you all for such an interesting start to the conference. My question is for everyone, I think. What sort of enablers do you think we need to support adoption of these soil and pasture practices? Is it just the market pull-through that was touched on, or is there more needed from government and industry and science sectors?
Maybe we could have a comment from everyone on that one.
I've got the magic stick. I think a bit of courage, actually. I think that, and James talked about this in his intro about willingness to fail. Consumers or customers will reward us for trying, right? They're going to worry about whether we hit our numbers or don't hit our numbers and all that sort of stuff as well. But the compelling part of the story is these are all the things that we're trying. Some of these will be interesting to you. Get on board. Is actually very compelling compared to just judge us on a number at the end of the process, right? So science is uncertain, there are risks in everything we do, own up to that and press ahead, right? And whatever we're innovating. Right?
Yeah, good question. I think probably we don't need government, I reckon. I reckon that will be a blocker, particularly if it's prescriptive government. So I think we do need courage. If I think about technologies that have been taken up in my lifetime of farming, there'll be some early adopters. There'll be people that push the envelope, and I suspect that plenty of them are in the room. And their success in their peers' eyes, or otherwise, will lead to the speed of adoption. So there's probably an enabler piece around telling the story. And there will definitely be some science questions that the science community needs to hop into and engage with. And we're starting to, they're starting to. You probably don't want to be, as a farmer, you don't want to be out there looked at by your peers as a complete lunatic and expect people to copy you. That's a bit tricky. So less of the lunatic perception and more of, yeah, these guys are doing a great job. Brad's doing a great job. We can see where he's going, and so what's he doing? Because farmers, by and large, are fairly inquisitive when a neighbour starts to do stuff.
Good stuff. Thanks, James. Laura, your thoughts?
So I can provide a beef perspective of this. We've got some people that are already doing some work, just like Brad is, who's doing, playing the paddocks and understands that soil health is really important and biodiversity is important and is trialling those things. But we're finding that it's not until someone puts an extra $1 on the table that we start seeing people have a reason to be curious and to put some money on the table then to do some lab tests, to do some trial paddocks. So we need that impetus. But then once we've got people interested in this and are starting to down this journey, we're still, I'm seeing a gap in the case studies. We in the room and most people in agriculture are known to be kinetic learners. We need to be able to see, touch, feel what it is that we want to embark on. So having more field studies, more field walks, case studies that be able to demonstrate the different climatic zones, the different soil types and interventions, so that people can have the confidence that if I try these couple of things, these are the outcomes I'm likely to get. And I think we probably just haven't got that saturation of easily accessible case studies for people at the moment.
Good point, Laura, and I think yesterday was a great example of that accessibility of see, touch, feel type things. So, Brad, enablers, what's your sense on that?
I think, well, what everyone else has, I agree with what everyone said, but we really got to focus on telling the stories, and tell the stories, the good experience, the bad experience.
Yep.
Be open, create connections, if everyone could sort of work together on delivery and focus on outcomes, I think, yeah, to me that's important.
Thanks, mate. Lynette, what's your sense on enablers?
So, as a scientist, we actually depend on you to change the system before we can study out what's happening. So, a scientist can run off and investigate, but if it's not relevant. So a lot of our work now is on field trials with farmers and learning from farmers, and that's where the soil biology is at. It's about being pushed by the land management change and not fiddling in a lab. It's about what's happening in your fields. So I think that's our major contribution.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay, another question there in the middle. Oh, to the front here first.
Thank you. I'm Kate Irons. We farm at Newry in Gippsland. My question is to Lynn. Congratulations, the Western Australian Farmers of the Year, Diane, Ian Haggerty, extraordinary farmers. How do all of us really amplify their voice and help what they've achieved spread across the land quickly?
Well, fortunately, they've had a lot of publicity recently, and that might enable inquisitive people to find out what they're doing, because they have done it through their own actions, and this is in a way what I mentioned before, because when I started working on multi-species, putting perennial grasses into annual pastures mainly, I didn't learn that from a textbook or doing my own work. I learned that from farmers who were very effective at doing it. So they are the same, and a lot of people are following them and the activities and what they're doing. And the science can come after these sort of implementations, because if we stick with the standard science, I once got money to study fertilisers. I studied soil animals in a very barren environment. It didn't help. It didn't help understanding. You've got to, what is a good soil? What is a healthy soil? What is happening as a scientist in those healthy soils? And the Haggertys are the example of that.
Good question. Thank you. I think we've got one in the middle there.
Yeah, you're in demand, Professor Abbott. I'm Scott Hamilton from Western Australia. You talked about habitat diversity with regard to soils and plants, but I had a question about animals. So, in the same situation, I'm talking about cattle manure and sheep manure. Is there a difference in the soil biology because of the animal?
Well, one thing that the animals do is actually walk on the soil. So there are impacts of disturbance related to just them existing on the soil. So that's something, and we heard yesterday, someone mentioned taking the animals off for a particular time when it was very wet. But the type, if you, just on a theoretical basis, the type of manure that goes through, and I'm thinking at the extreme, horse manure is very different to sheep manure. That's probably the only thing I know different. But we do research on manures, forms of manure, but it's mainly pig I think historically most of our research, some cattle. So currently we're doing more on dairy, and that's coming up. We've got a new grant, but it's the difference between these types of manures would be, if you work back to see what was in them, the form, the shape of the organic matter, and the state of it, that would be probably different across the animals. The digestibility of it, and the rate at which it then broke down, and then the free nutrients that are in it as well. These all impact the environment of the organisms, and then it's the amount you add will have another effect. So it's not one answer here.
But would you advocate animal biodiversity as well?
I mean sheep and cattle in the same pack. Are you talking about? Yeah. Oh, look, that's outside of my expertise. But over time, maybe, but you've got to manage land. I don't manage it at that level.
Thanks for the question, Scott. Thanks, Lynn. We've got time for another couple. Yep.
Alicia Belgrove from Deakin University. I'm actually a marine biologist and with seaweed, specialisation in seaweed, and I just wanted to it's more of a comment, share some findings of the research of one of my PhD students, because I think it's relevant to this conversation, really supports what pretty much everyone's saying there. And our question was looking at seaweed, but talking about sustainability, and I think it was Laura said that, you know, sustainability is often one of those kind of vague terms and people don't really understand what it means, and it's being waved around a lot in the context of seaweed at the moment. And so we were trying to understand what sustainability meant to different kinds of stakeholders. And I think the finding that's really relevant to the conversation here is that people really wanted, they didn't really mind if it was like fully articulated what you wanted and fully documented with evidence, but they wanted to know what aspect you were trying to address, and they wanted transparency and honesty in that. So I think it really relates to the conversation about having the stories, giving the evidence, but also supporting that with the stories and being honest there. So trying to show that you're trying to make a difference, I guess, there in those steps, small steps, to end up with the big impact, I guess.
Good stuff. Any thoughts in response from our speakers?
I mean, we should never underestimate how credible, in the eyes of the public, the farming community is, right? And so having farm-scale trials with a few data points coming out of that is a really, really powerful part of the narrative, and, you know, we should never underestimate that. I think we do at times.
Magic. I think we've got another couple of minutes. Yep, another question.
This is CJ from Magical Victoria. This question for Brad, and really good story, and I really enjoy your story. As a resilient farmer, I would like to know what you really expect from current research and development, what sort of area and what sort of potential you expect for future farming.
So sorry, just say that again.
I would like to know what, from research and development perspective, what sort of area do you expect to develop? For example, whether it is for grass or whether it is development of animals or some sort of
So research priorities.
Yeah. Obviously, we want to feed the world. As farmers, what we do is feed everyone. So let's open it. It's an open book. Let's look at every avenue. As a farmer, I'm all for innovation. I'm all for research. I'm all for looking at new ideas that are moving forward. To me, it's an open book. I think it's that answer.
Yeah. And maybe something to discuss over morning tea as well, mate, because it's complex. James, do you want to comment?
From our farm's point of view, I guess we're always looking for stuff that makes our life easier. So from Victoria, and we absolutely, from our own point of view, animals are in there for different species, different forage species. So growing more for less, always important. And then from an absolute macro point of view, we sit here as farmers, we've got an extra 1.5 or 2 billion people going to turn up in the world by 2050. How are we going to feed them? So when I think about it from that point of view, to think about, fine, we live in a A-class country, there's no reason for anybody to be hungry in Australia.
We all know that. We're going to generate 2 or 3 or 4 times the amount of feed as our domestic population. We know that. If you're in a country where that doesn't happen, I think we've got an obligation to do that, and as researchers in the agriculture community, we need to make sure that we keep punching along to make sure that people get fed. Otherwise, we've kind of failed as farmers.